Well, thanks for joining us. I know, yeah, everyone's probably got a belly full of food. Food was lovely out there. And so this afternoon, I guess, we'll kick off by talking about AVOD and the brand synergies and brand partnerships. And we've got a brilliant panel here in front of us today. There's so many acronyms in our industry. AVOD, SVOD, TVOD, MVP VOD, Fast Now, linear broadcasting. I sometimes struggle to keep a track of everything going on. But I want to sort of ask the panel here today what you think the distinctions in specifically advertising VOD and BVOD, broadcasting VOD, are, I guess, Sach, in the UK.
I think certainly I'm based in the UK, and we do a lot of work with UK broadcasters, streamers, and in the US primarily. So in the UK, I mean, it's just become a very blurred line, to be honest. Trying to distinguish what is a SVOD, BVOD, AVOD, as you're saying, even what's a sort of broadcast versus streaming, what's hosted on IPTV and so on. I think if we stand back, the way we look at AVOD and BVOD are probably the closest things together at the moment, because certainly aside from the BBC in the UK, which is not ad funded, all the other platforms, the streamers, have an element of ad support or ad funding to them. Even the bigger guys now we're seeing, like Netflix and Prime, who traditionally grew up in the SVOD space, as they're trying to make their business models more sort of commercially viable and sustainable, are transitioning towards ad funding as well.
And that shift has almost come full circle. So from Netflix and the streamers starting out as SVOD only, now they're slowly starting to wake up and realize that there's definitely monetary value in playing in the AVOD/BVOD era. Anyone else?
So in this region, we didn't really have the BVOD. We just skipped straight. The broadcasters didn't necessarily, in the same way the UK did. And I think that's stemmed back from the history is, BBC, say, iPlayer or something like that was quite innovative. And we didn't necessarily have the same innovation at that level at the time, and the main streaming services here eventually entered as streaming services, and many of them started as subscription, and now they're adding advertising. So yes, the acronyms are blurred, and the landscape is emerging, but it's actually less messy. We don't have a Roku, we don't have Hulu, we don't have that sort of like Tubi. We don't have the pure free services per se. We've got the 6 or 7. Our friend Jan here has done a report in the Streaming Lab where he has 65 streaming apps in the region, and they all look quite similar. They're not very differentiated. They have an app. They either license or do originals, and they do subscription, and they don't really have communities online. And I spent 2 years leading the CTV task force and the IAB MENA, and except the last year, so 2 years prior, we had very, very, very little data to work with on AVOD. Very little case studies, very little. And only in the last 12 months has it sort of really sort of grown. But at these panels and at these industry events over the last 6-7 years, SVOD and AVOD were spoke about, but they were spoke about in siloed. And now it's kind of accepted that it's merging together, but we're still in the emerging area.
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing here is, look, the region has a propensity for a certain amount of subscriptions, same as globally, right? So there's always going to be a limit to the number of subscriptions that people are prepared to pay for. So the only way that we're going to be able to properly monetize the entire region is through AVOD. But the reality is, whether the region is ready for the kind of AVOD that we're talking about on the kind of mass scale that we're talking about is a question of timing. CPM rates need to go up in order for AVOD to be sustainable and to make sense for content owners. So what I think and I suspect we're moving towards is going to be a blended model similar to Hulu in the US, where you'll have a base subscription and you'll have an advertising component. That way you can monetize through both mechanisms and you can reach a wider audience. But until the CPM rates go up, I mean, in Iraq, they're still unfortunately very low. It's going to be very, very difficult to purely have a business based on AVOD because the revenues are not sufficient. So I think you need some kind of blended option.
Another acronym, thanks William there. Can you elaborate on CPM for those who are unfamiliar with the term?
Yeah, okay. So
what that means for the industry?
Yeah, no worries. So just as a point of reference, right? My background is in subscription. I knew next to nothing about the advertising sector, and oh my God, there's so many acronyms in AVOD. CPM is cost per impressions, so it's cost per 1,000 impressions. So YouTube typically has, depending on the geo of the country, you could be looking at 20, 30, $35 per 1,000 impressions. In Iraq, you're lucky if you get $10. So the higher that number, then the more revenue that's generated per 1,000 views. It's as simple as that. Has that helped? Did I answer the question?
Yeah, well, absolutely. As per the definition I know. So I used to work at Channel 4, traditionally a broadcaster VOD, not a traditional AVOD. And CPM was the currency of selling advertising. Now, a CPM for a younger male demographic was far higher for an older demographic. Now, the reason being is if I am 16 and I go out and buy a razor and that brand is Gillette, then I'm going to stick with Gillette for the rest of my life. So it's super important to target the younger demographics. And when you guys are creating content, ad-funded, branded, how do you cater for certain demographics? Does that come into play as part of your decision-making process?
Yeah, it does. So at the moment, we're creating a lot of original content for La Liga, which is the Spanish Premier League. We have co-exclusive rights in Iraq, so we're creating a lot of content specifically tailored to a younger audience who watch football and are passionate and love football, and that gets a higher rate.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately who is the brand that you're working with and who are they looking to target as an audience. We've got a series at the moment that we're producing with Channel 4 for their BVOD platform, stroke AVOD platform, as well as their main linear channel. And it's a show about cancer surgery, so it's a quite difficult watch, and it's been produced in collaboration with Macmillan Cancer Support, who is one of the leading cancer charities in the UK. And so when we were developing and producing that series, they're naturally leaning towards a slightly older population because actually that's where cancer care tends to be most prevalent. And so the content creation and the beats in the show are based around that slightly higher brow audience. And then actually when the viewing figures came in for it, it was exactly that. It was sort of skewing 44 years plus, which was absolutely their audience.
Yes, definitely. On the CPM models, unfortunately, in the region, you have diversity, which is you have in Iraq, you have in Egypt. Because of the currency fluctuations, you have that issue where your CPMs go lower and it will not be effective to work only on AVODs. Yet what we enjoy in this region is that you have that integration, which you can work as a Middle East. And this is what we are working as also a part of Z5 and part of our offerings, being the fast channels that we have launched, but also of other representations on digital that we have, is that we have blended CPMs and we work on geographies where we can diversify and we can also take out that CPM hurdle that you face. If we're going to go in the Middle East and go by borders, go localized by Iraq by itself or Egypt by itself, of course it's going to be a losing game. But what is happening is that we either collaborate with other platforms or we collaborate on geographies, being Saudi enjoys one of the high CPMs in the region. And it's one of high demands, especially video and OTT. If you go to any brand ambassador, or if you go to any agency and media buying unit, they will ask you and they will tell you that there is high demand for video. Offer us more. We want this. There is hunger for it. They want to go away from YouTube. They have only Shahid that is available right now. Of course, others are available, 1,001 and others. Yet they want more because they want to work on these models, which provide different geographies. Let's work on it, blended CPMs and CPVs. And in that, both partners, the brand association because at the end, the distribution is across MENA, and also for the content provider, which is the OTT owner, will gain on high CPMs and the revenues. That will make sense at the end. And this is how we are moving around this.
Yeah, I think when it comes to content, people are the industry's trying to figure out what sort of content to match with what sort of business model. And a lot of the premium streaming services do see a role of AVOD because you can match it against premium content. With the right ad tech, you can have higher CPMs. You can get up to $30 if you're lucky. But people don't really think that advertising is enough for, say, a fast channel in the region because we don't see that amount of spend going on to these services, because if the money is moving from elsewhere into digital, it's going on to other platforms, be it TikTok, Meta, Suite, Google, and all that sort of stuff. And they take up the lion's share of, say there's 6 billion worth of digital ad spend in the region. They take up about 4 billion of that. And that's including digital out of home and retail and everything. So where's the money going to come from, and what's the business model around it? So the thinking is that the premium streaming services can have, as William said, that blended model, and it can supplement the revenue there. But for advertising alone, as fast as the jury's out. What we do under Augustus, we've sort of two offerings in streaming. We have one which is Smashy TV, and right now we stick to subscription because we produce the local sports. So we'll do about 2,000 games this year in basketball, futsal, volleyball, handball, and it's not profitable, but local people will pay $5 a month to watch these games at a small level. So, while it's not competing for La Liga rights, it's replacing the incumbent local TV stations. With Love in Dubai and the Love in cities, fast would be the logical thing, because Love in is essentially a tabloid, and we've been able to monetize on social media, but we think and the metrics that we look at aren't just CPMs, it's smart TV penetration. Samsung TV Plus, I don't know how proprietary this information is, but Samsung TV Plus isn't available on all their models yet. It's only on 24 and 23, but they're going to backdate it to 22 and 21. And at the moment, they are on 1.5 million devices in 3 markets: KSA, UAE, and Egypt. 500,000 UAE, 400,000 KSA, and the rest in Egypt. And that's separate to Tizen. So that's separate to the whole app ecosystem. So if you believe in that ecosystem, that's one OS. That's one of 10, 11 OS. If you believe in that, then you think that there could be opportunity for a fast and ad-funded model, because you've got salespeople at Samsung ads, at Huawei ads, at LG ads going out and selling against their platform. And then you have to look at, what's your ad tech? What's your server? Who's your platform? Do you go with a Maggie, and how do you get onto these platforms? And they're quite selective there. But I think, and then it comes down to your question, which is, which content do the audience actually want?
And content is king, right? I think we forget that traditional TV as we know it has only been around for less than a century. So the generational shift that we've seen in the last 10 years from a TV set in your household to an iPad and an iPhone, and now the ability to flick onto any single streaming app in the world and watch any piece of content is scary. And how does the audience behavior and the generational shifts change with the type of, or the way they're consuming content? So is fast here to stay, is what I'm trying to get at, and how does that impact traditional advertising space as we know it today?
So if I may, I think fast is here to stay. You cannot take fast out. So at the end, the model that we're finding, maybe the region is moving the right direction here, which is you're blending. AVOD is not only a CPM model and so on. AVOD is growing under a platform, which is, yes, as we said, there's an SVOD, there's an AVOD model under it. Under AVOD, what we're seeing in the OTT platform, they're offering fast part of that equation, which is a supportive unit. It has to be an incremental revenue. If you want to depend on fast in this region as a standalone revenue, then you will not survive on that. But for it to stay, yes, it will stay, but it has to be, I think this is how it needs to be worked out. Incremental revenue, part of a revenue stream that goes hand in hand under the universe of AVOD for that OTT platform. So every OTT platform, be it Shahid, be it Starzone, what they have also launched right now, and if we want to consider other platforms that are coming on board, both has to be blended together, which is your programmatic advertising that comes, being a pre-roll, video roll, or so on, or being a fast channel on it. But the main thing, I think, for us and where the region is moving forward is content blending and content integrations. The moment that we start looking into that and offering the clients and offering our investors these conversations where we discuss, you know what, besides going with programmatic advertising, working on surplus and what we can deliver on numbers, 1,000 impression or a million impression, we can communicate that towards an audience, and that communication will be elaborated. You will be hitting on the spot with that content. We have faced that also on different OTT platforms that we work with. We work with Wiyaq. They have that. They have done a great collaboration with Pepsi. They created a whole section, a whole page for Pepsi, and they discussed different aspects of Lay's in specific. We have seen Red Bull launching many content on different platforms. Being also on Shahid, you'll see that you can look into it. Felix, when he had his great jump, it was live streamed, and this is a content collaboration that you can work on, and this you can also get into your premiums that go beyond the CPM model, and also in that, in parallel, FAST will support you as an incremental revenue. So this is my answer to it, which is FAST is here to stay, but look into FAST as an incremental revenue to support your revenue stream, not just as a standalone, especially for this region.
It's fascinating. I was at MIP TV earlier this year, and the MD of Pluto was saying the exact thing that you just said, that they have a piece of content, they'll put it on their AVOD, but they'll also put it on their FAST, because he's explaining this whole concept of lean in and lean back. And if I wanted to lean back and watch 5 episodes of Big Bang Theory, I don't want to think about which episode to watch, and I'll flick on the FAST channel. But he'll also put Big Bang Theory on his AVOD channel, because there are the alternate Big Bang fan base who want to go and watch a specific season or an episode. So he's monetizing the same piece of content through both models, which I think is fascinating. Any other thoughts on FAST? Or can we move on to, I like the segue into actual specific examples.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. I think, you know, and Starzone was mentioned as well, is that FAST seems to be a bolt-on rather than an individual strategy. You know, anyone with, Fubo TV are a good example of this. And other services will have their premium subscription and then a day plus one or something and spin off separate content. I think DAZN might be launching a FAST as well, separate to their premium subscription. So exactly that point, that ambient, recognizing that smart TV will have a linear, for some people in some homes and some devices, that it will be a behavior type. But I think you alluded to it earlier around behavior types and what are people watching. And you know, there are some narratives and notions that people in the region won't subscribe to content, but a lot of it is down to good the whole mix, right? The good content, the good apps, 5G penetration, you know, subscription software, customer service, like all these sort of things. And if you provide a good service, you know, NBC came out with Shahid's numbers, and first 9 months of this year, they're at 4.8 million subs, paying subs, and their AVOD has gone up 113%. So they're doing both, and it is working. You know, that's a kind of a 10-year build-up. You know, so I guess that it's a bolt-on FAST.
Yeah, there are a lot of companies doing both, because you almost hook in the younger generation to the AVOD service, not willing to pay, and as they grow older, they're willing to dip their hand in their pocket and actually, I will migrate and cross over to the SVOD version. And then there's layers, right? So Netflix are creating these layers and different supported tiers, whereas you pay this incremental amount, then you'll get this little bit extra. And I think as we move into the sports streaming era, you'll see those layers come into play a lot more. So yeah, I want to change it back and talk about some real life examples, and maybe shift gears slightly and talk about SVOD. Sachin and I were discussing this earlier, actually. How do you see SVOD playing its hand within the brand and ad space, specifically around the likes of Drive to Survive, extended beyond that, cinematic releases and brand-funded partnerships such as Barbie, and how does that impact audience engagement?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating area because if, as you say, this is such a fast-moving space. It's only, really in the last 10 years or so we've seen such a dramatic shift. And the SVOD guys, until reasonably recently, haven't really had to focus much on the AVOD or ad tier. As you talk about, that, there are these various tiers that are emerging. Really, when a lot of these guys launched, it was all a race to subscribers. How many subscribers can you get? How many subscribers can you get? And frankly, their success was measured by subscriber growth. And if you've added 5% or 10%, that's good for the share price and everyone's winning. Until some smart Alex on Wall Street went, actually, where's the profitability coming from these SVOD players? And when you look beneath them all, they've all been spending, certainly the big guys have been spending so much on the actual content, and you're comparing that to the subs revenue, and there was just a huge deficit that didn't look like it was able to kind of bridge itself anytime soon. So that's necessitated the move towards ad funding, because content's still funded the way it always has been. It's partially subscription, it's partially advertising based. That's what the traditional broadcast model is. And so as these SVOD guys are developing their own ad tech, their ad sales teams, with that comes an increasing level of sophistication in terms of how to interact with brands. And that can take all shapes and sizes, from basic sort of advertising at one end to actual brand-funded programming at the other, which is probably an area that we'll come back to. But the two examples that you mentioned of the Drive to Survive and Barbie are really around sort of brand access as much as anything. So Drive to Survive wasn't actually, certainly as far as I'm aware, funded by Formula One, but it's proved to be a huge hit. And what Formula One did was really just sort of open the doors in a way that hadn't been seen before. And it's been a hugely popular program, which has just driven the viewership of Formula One, which is what they're ultimately looking to do. There was a statistic from a poll, albeit a reasonably small poll in the US, but where they took a poll on what the impact of Drive to Survive was on somebody's desire or not to view Formula One. And it was over 50%, it was something like 53% of viewers from Formula One were putting that down to Drive to Survive, and it was just creating this sort of additional intrigue around them. And then Barbie, was Barbie big in the region over here? Yeah? In the UK, it was certainly in the US as well. It was absolute Barbie mania. I know my wife and her friends were all dressed up in pink and out to the movies. The impact that's had has been phenomenal. Mattel, which owns Barbie, licensed effectively the Barbie brand to the studio. And they had a piece of the revenue share, and then there's been incremental sales in just the Barbie merchandising on the back of it. So I think at the end of 2023, so it was still reasonably early into the Barbie sort of takeover, there was something like $125 million of incremental revenue that Mattel had gained through the film. So it just goes to show that these brand extensions can happen in many, many different ways.
Yeah, I think Drive to Survive and Netflix is an example which set the scene for the whole sports industry, because you've seen Amazon spin off the All or Nothing franchise, and at the end of the day, they're building a documentary off the back of a brand, and the brand is the football club. Beckham did it last year. He is the brand, and he went to Netflix and said, let's do a 4-part documentary on myself. And Ronaldo does it through his interviews, and it's amazing how the talent themselves are becoming the brand, and they're leveraging content to put that brand out there. Does anyone else have any thoughts and examples?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Netflix's strategy has been to make assets around the sports rather than pay for the live sports. There's a lot of chat now. They're doing, I think, a couple of NBA games at Christmas. They're doing their own asset. I think maybe this weekend the boxing one. But like basically, Last Dance, Drive to Survive, Beckham, all that sort of stuff was assets around the sports without paying for F1. But both can be monetized, right? Like what we're seeing in the Russian Saudi Pro League at the moment is that Shahid, part of their subscribers is that Saudi Pro League, right? Like they're subscribing that. And up until lately, they were separate entities. NBC was a listed entity. Most of the football clubs were PIF and private. Now that's sort of merged, but you saw DAZN entering the market and signing deals with clubs in Saudi for channels. So the Al Nassr club on DAZN has watch-alongs. We were talking about this, and there's separate documentaries. So they're doing assets around the sports. So it's a win-win for the for the actual brands. Like Formula One eventually won, and the whole ecosystem around tickets and experiences and everything like that will grow on the back of both live streaming on sports and also assets around the sports. Like at the Broadcast Pro event last week, the Uns Jabeur documentary on Todd, the being that one, that's the equivalent of referencing Beckham here in terms of that's the leading sports documentary in the region. A Tunisian female tennis player made Wimbledon final, and that's sort of setting the tone as well. So the playbook is there. The playbook and the references you made on sports is there. It's what do you do everything? And what we're seeing in the local sports world is we're doing the production for local games because the leagues themselves don't have a production partner to sell the rights. So what you have is, each of these countries across the region have anywhere between 5 and 10 local TV stations who have an OB truck.
So we have IDB just signed a deal to sponsor the broadcast studio. We're doing ad insertion. We haven't yet done it, but we will be doing ad insertion into the games. So the banners will be sponsored by our broadcast partners. And then exactly what you just said, we're looking to roll out a number of hyper-localized productions from social media creators, influencers. One thing we're going to be experimenting with is using different commentators. So we're going to get influencers to create and commentate on matches locally. And then, we'll take their commentary and we'll use that where the audience likes it. So it's about creating, for us, for our sports proposition, about creating a hyper-localized experience for the users. And AdTech has an important role to play there in providing different ways to monetize that content, because the reality is that not everyone wants to pay for it. So you need to create the right blend. But I think what Richard said is really critical about doing different types of content, experimenting, different types of shows, different types of viewing experiences that might not be about the game, but might be about what's going on around the game, and then using that as the basis to monetize and to work with advertisers. It's early days yet, but we're getting there. So
I love what also Richard said also about the playbook, and the playbook is there, and especially by the Shahid Group or the NBC Group itself. It's what they have done is, and I would have to say I admire what they have done, how they have managed to break into that question mark is, can I also look beyond my only AVOD streaming model and so on? Let me look into actually have that click with SVOD. So if I'm not mistaken, also that premium content that has been offered by the Saudi Premier League, yes, you do have that for live streaming for the certain channels in certain regions. I think here in the UAE it's free for everyone to watch the live matches as being broadcasted. But creating a whole atmosphere around it, creating a whole ecosystem around this, which is, as you said, one of the, I think one of the successful documentaries they have created was for Al Ittihad Football Club. A whole story has been created about Al Ittihad. Al Ittihad is, if I may say, is the highest popular or the most popular football club in Saudi Arabia. It's the #1 football club in popularity and also by history. I think it was first initiated in Saudi. And they created a whole not a documentary, but actually a series around that. When the moment they have launched an AVOD live streaming for the football channels, for the football matches. At the beginning, everyone thought that the football matches were available only for subscription. You can only watch it under an SVOD wall or under a paywall. But by pushing for that model, pushing that no, it's available for free, there is a whole football around this, and there is a sports ecosystem that you can work into it. You've seen that how there is a high drive now in Shahid, even from non-Arab speakers. I have friends that are from different countries, from India, from Western regions, or from the Western countries, are subscribing or just downloading the Shahid app to watch these matches, to watch this content. Maybe also one of the things that helped it is the Saudi vision, which is, you know what, let me get these superstars part of that. So there are these followers. It's admirable. The playbook is there. And I think what we need to work on is to know how to exactly monetize and work into the content. What we are working in is to provide content. By providing that content, then you work on monetization. Let's not work on the reverse, which is I want to monetize, then I will provide you content. It's the other way around, which is provide that content, make it available, and based on that, is it under AVOD model, is it an SVOD, is it under that content integration that come with other brands? Can I offer it even on my competition? Can I offer it to being on YouTube channels? Can I have it being also into bits, which is available on Instagram as stories and pieces on Facebook? So this is the whole model that we need to look into. I know that one of the topics is how to monetize branded content. And I think this is how it is. We should look beyond AVOD. We should look into digital monetization beyond, by brand integrations and creating an ecosystem, creating an atmosphere. And sports is the perfect model for this, especially in this region.
So. Brilliant summary. So I want to, Sach, you mentioned about the way that success has been measured previously at the start of this new content SVOD boom was through subscriber growth. Netflix forgot about how much they were actually spending on the content, and then they realized there was this huge deficit. So now we as a data science company, we're continuously looking at key metrics such as new subscriber acquisitions, net adds, not just subscriber acquisitions, but then other key metrics such as retention, engagement, and churn reduction. How do we go about measuring the future success of content in general, but I guess specifically towards brand-funded content and advertising? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. For brand-funded content, we've got to remember that the way a brand looks at content is very different to how an AVOD or SVOD will look at content. An AVOD or SVOD is ultimately looking to grow their subscriber numbers so that we're all paying and they're hopefully making a handsome profit at the end of it. For a brand or an advertiser, branded content is just one of the streams where they're spending their marketing dollars. So for them, branded content as an advertiser is competing with them producing TV commercials or billboards or putting content on radio or social media. So ultimately for these guys, I think it's about having more often than not a holistic view across the board. And success for them is, for marketeers within these brands, is still about ROI, because they'll have metrics which say, okay, if I buy some media space on the TV channels in traditional 60-second commercials, 30-second commercials, for every dollar I spend, I should get a return of $2.1 or whatever their number is. And so they're having to, and again, with increasing sophistication, rather than the lure of just being associated with good content, it's what is that content bringing back. And with traditional broadcast, there's still quite a well-trodden path there, which is, as you say, you had the measurement when you used to work at Channel 4. So a brand could look at a program and say if they're putting it out at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night, they know it will get roughly 1 million viewers, and they can work with their agency to create what that's worth in terms of media value. Let's say that value is $1 million. So if they're therefore spending more than $1 million on the program, it doesn't make sense. If they're spending less than $600,000 or $700,000, it's probably going to be a good return for them. So it comes down to that ultimately, And then you get into the nuances of, well, how much is the brand willing to put in? How much is the AVOD platform willing to put in, or the broadcaster willing to put in? And that's certainly the big theme that's playing out. And one of the sort of obstacles we find with AVOD is that there isn't that sort of guaranteed viewership. As we all know, if we're logging into our streaming platforms, we'll have things that are recommended to us, and probably sort of 80% of our viewing comes from 20% of the things that we actually see. So if you're then a brand that's investing in branded content on an AVOD or any other VOD platform, it probably needs to be supplemented with quite a high level of advertising and promotion just to bring us, the viewers, to that actual show. And it's then really only after the fact that the success can be measured. So again, it's a variation from the traditional model.
I think just on the success of the streaming services, before Netflix went on their sort of last 2 years, 18 months, stock price surged when they were losing subscribers. Their operating margin, I don't know the exact dates, I think Q4 22, their operating margin was 5% profit. And they were billed as one of the only streamers that were profitable. Now their operating margin is 30%. So the success is a bundle of everything, and the bottom line is something that everyone can measure. And I think, you alluded to the Wall Street sort of asking that question, and now everyone's sort of on that strive to profitability, and most streamers, the big incumbents, are sort of getting there. It's just, is it profitable enough to sustain the losses of their legacy businesses? And that's the second problem. But the streaming part is measurable. It's getting profitable in however way you approach it. In terms of branded content, I go along with what Sachin, what you said to a point. I think, just from our business alone, about 90% of our business this year is branded content. Of a $12 million business, about 90% is branded content on social media, because we have the reach there, because we have 1 billion views, we have 14 million social channels. If we had the same downloads and apps and ability on streaming, I think we could make equivalent revenue on streaming without the lower funnel, without the ROI per se, because brands do understand, the proof is in what our business is at the moment. Sure, marketers are always going to ask that question overall, but I think you can get awareness branding, and I think you can get branded content that tells a story without a sell at the end of it, and I think that's part of the marketing mix. But the reason why we're not getting it much at the moment is branded content on streaming services is more expensive than doing, and your business has, for that point, you have a social shop just for this, because that clients are more likely to make 5 reels than they are commission a 10-part series that's a non-funded program for a streaming service, because A, it's more expensive, and B, there's less reach. So I think that's the point about branded content. But as streaming matures, I think we will see more branded content that doesn't necessarily, and I could be wrong on this, but clearly ad tech and FAST and AVOD needs to have a Facebook moment, because if it doesn't, it's never going to get the $100 billion that Facebook is getting. It'll get some of it, and I personally believe that audio is on the cusp of this. I think podcasts will have their Facebook moment, because 20 years ago when Google IPO'd, it was for about 10 years they were known as the one where you can do ROI with PPC. And when Facebook IPO'd, no one thought that you could spend performance marketing on Facebook, right? We all remember that. No one thought that you could drive performance on Facebook in the early days. When they IPO'd, they had no mobile advertising in 2012. And it's the same with podcasts at the moment. No one really thinks you can build a direct-to-performance business on audio. They think it's awareness. But I think we will get there. There's e-commerce brands in the US who are only doing audio, who are selling e-commerce. And I think we'll get there. And I think the real test on AVOD is, can we have ad tech? Can we have a proposition? Can we have a sales house? Can we have a platform who Facebookifies AVOD? And that's the only way that we'll really get real revenue on this stuff. And Netflix, to be fair, have the best bet on this. People are critical of Netflix because they haven't delivered a lot of advertising. Their CPMs are high. They partnered with Microsoft. But Netflix are building their own ad server because they don't want to give 30-40% to Spring Server, to GAM or whatever. And I have every faith that Netflix will do to streaming what Facebook has done to performance as well in time, and then the rest of us will copy.
Yeah, I think you're right. When it comes to branded content on social and even audio, it's much more prevalent, and it's probably ultimately due to the cost of the content. It's much cheaper to create stuff for social and for audio. In our social studio, when we're producing things for TikTok or Instagram, we can do that for a few $1,000s. Whereas if we're producing a proper series, a long-form series for AVOD or SVOD, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the actual brand investment is so much higher. That's where there's so much more of a microscope over then what the return is.
For me, what I think also on being a measurement of success is that it depends. What is the actual ROI that is being requested by the brand? So one of the main things that we need to look at is also what is the KPIs the brand has requested? Is it awareness? Is it reach? What is that is being on the table being discussed for us to deliver to that brand? And one of the main things also, I keep on mentioning to the region, to hear the potential of this region. This region is one of the places where live stream, or not say, linear TV is still, in certain countries, is still active and is still alive. And this is an area where we can look into an opportunity of collaboration and which branded content can come into equation, which is a branded content come into a collaboration between a linear with a high reach in Egypt in specific. It's a market where TV keeps on growing. And I think also in Iraq, where TV is still growing there. So there are areas of collaboration in this market that you can work into different mediums where we can deliver higher KPIs and higher ROIs. Let's collaborate with other partners. If TV is growing and AVOD is growing at the same part, then let's collaborate together into taking that and deliver higher reach for the brand. Brands, I think here as MENA, what we always have known is one of the cheapest markets for advertisers. If you look into globally with higher, you have mentioned it, Richard, which is, we enjoy a low CPM. I don't want to say it's a hurdle, actually it's an opportunity. Enjoying low CPMs means that we have a higher opportunity of investment. I don't call advertisers or clients. Let's call them investors. They'll come and invest in our market, buy that, go with a low CPM, with a low cost of spot or so on, and be in a CPP or be a CPRP. So by that, with these collaborations, they will deliver higher. They will reach into a point that, I can tell you one example. I had a conversation with one of the major clients, one of the big 4 clients here in the region. And the funny equation was that he told me that I've never seen a media plan which can deliver a 70+ reach. It's not available in any other market. A 70+ reach with a media plan, with a media mix, and it goes up. So this is where the opportunity is. You can invest cheap, you can invest on low CPMs, on low CPP models, on linear, collaborate together, be in the complete OTT with a social media provider and a linear platform. Imagine what the opportunity is and what we can deliver as ROIs and success for the clients.
Just a quick
William,
point,
go for
just to support what you said. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be really frank. We never would have got the sponsorship that we got from our brands if it wasn't for our linear channel. In Iraq, linear is holding up actually reasonably well. We're still getting good ad rates on our linear channels. So the only way that we're really gonna make that transition is to have exactly as you set out, where the proposition isn't just streaming, but the proposition is also linear. Just one additional point to make. Advertisers in this region are still a little bit behind in Europe and the US, where they're embracing digital streaming and digital advertising. So they need a little bit more convincing to shift their budget, their spend from linear, where they believe they have a historical precedent and a historical ROI reference, to much more experimental streaming AVOD-based solutions. So you need to be able to show them an ROI, you need to be able to show them other KPIs, as you mentioned, to de-risk it for them and to enable them to make that transition. But that's going to take time. So for us, partnering with our linear platform, our linear partners, has been a critical driver in encouraging people to advertise with us.
Thanks, William. We're almost at time, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions. But I guess the last question for me is a forward-looking one. And AI is here. AI is not going away. Agents are here. So how is that going to impact and shape the future of advertising specifically and brand partnerships? So just maybe 1 or 2 lines each on that before we go to questions.
I think we're still in the sort of generative AI part of it, and I speak on our side. We use the cameras that we have to do the sports have 4 lenses, and they stitch together the 4 lenses with AI. There's no OB truck, there's no camera person, so we're able to do 2,000 games a year because of AI, without staff per se. And then on top of that, then we can do automated highlights, we can do AI highlights and all this sort of stuff, and so that's moving fast. On the advertising side of it, it's still in the generative part, right? Like, can you create your ad without the ad agency? Can you use this video generator tools and things like that? A/B tests, multiple formats, React and things like that. And I think that's the direction we're going. The ones who are going to lead it again are what Meta are doing is putting AI at every part of their tools, from our avatars on Instagram to auto copy and ads and ad dashboards. So AI, there was a research I think this week that said, I forget the exact stats, but this region is ahead 5%. I don't know where they got it from, but 5% of the budgets in this region in advertising is AI, and 50-something% of a small plug. It's on our Smashy Business Instagram, this exact stats, but 54% of marketers in the region use AI in their ads versus 30% globally. So much like 10, 12 years ago when social media penetration in the region, most views per capita in YouTube in the world was Saudi Arabia and things like that. I think we're moving super fast in AI, and brands are doing it. How they're doing it, what they're doing it, do they know how they're measuring it? That's the exciting part.
Yeah, another rapidly moving area. I think there's 2 elements to it. One is for advertising and brands, there still needs to be human creativity at the heart of it, is our perspective. Because to do good advertising, you need to come up with concepts that are evolving, that haven't come up before, and through AI is scraping from all the data that's already out there. So what's its ability to come up with new? So we still think there's a very big human element there. But the big role for AI we see is, as you're just mentioning, with you no longer need OB trucks for the sports footage. I think we see the same thing in terms of if you when it comes to like the production services element, how you can do the editing, how you can do dubbing, subtitling, how you can regionalize things. There's huge potential synergies there, which again, you come full circle, and that potentially helps this whole brand-funded piece, because if the overall cost of content or production can come down through the use of AI, it gives us sort of more realistic sort of financial commitments that we'll be asking for from brands and advertising, and therefore can probably get more into the AVOD, SVOD space.
Very simple, reduce costs, as you said, and hopefully open up experimentation, new approaches, and different technologies which are maybe integrated or using AI.
Yeah, I would love what Sachin also said, is that in AI there's huge opportunities. Take into account just one big opportunity that is rising in the region, which is Saudi, an official currency has been launched. 1st of Jan, we're going to move into term, and this is launched by MRC and MMS. So which is, imagine AI comes into the equation. So we always say that the brands are looking for localization. We want to localize to our target audience. We want to localize to our key clients and so on. So if AI comes in with this technology being in place, what is the limit for us? I don't see a limit to efficiencies. So you'll expect more efficiencies in media planning and media investments. Media planning by itself is a science that we all have to admire at the end. And taking AI into account, this will provide great opportunities for the future. Plus, there is AI will give us with certain info and certain backgrounds and available data to know exactly how we can localize to our people. How I can localize to Saudi, how I can localize to certain other countries in the GCC or to Iraq or Egypt, for example. So yeah, I see a huge opportunity in AI, and I see an implementation starting from next year. So.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Do you have any time for questions or any questions?
Thanks, Amit. You obviously worked on football as your primary example, big audience driver. Outside of that, is it genre-led, as in kids, drama, or is it lifestyle, or is it product-led, as in real estate? Where is the money when you leave the social media talent, obviously, as well? Where is the money coming from if it's not coming from Ronaldo and Messi and football?
I think it's good panelists here to talk about like pan-Arab media and what the drivers are. The productions can be hits in each market. Watch It is doing well in Egypt because it produces well there. The new Saudi shows are on Shahad, and that's driving a lot. It's documentaries with Saudi actors, and there's medias around that. There was a Red Sea Film conference happening today, which, the whole ecosystem around Saudi production is growing, not just in sports. Historically, Levant content, Syrian and Lebanese was good in Ramadan shows, drive a lot of subscribers, and still will. And in that 30 format, episode is changing to 7, 15, and so show series and things like that. Going back to the point about like trying everything with partnerships, with bringing in La Liga, with coming up with different formats. There's lots of different things. We haven't seen a big crossover of influencers into streaming and money at the moment. It seems to be a bit separate, where they're monetizing on their own channels. Some of the singers have had shows that have driven subscribers. Elisa, Miriam Fares, some of these Lebanese icons do drive documentaries and subscriptions. So I wouldn't say the mistake that people will make is the only content, and William might correct me, but the only content that ever worked pan-Arab was English movies on NBC subtitled. Like, to try 22 countries, the different dialects, to try pan-Arab media with either one thing, whether it's a genre or a thing. There are issues that can be pan-Arab. There are issues that movies can dictate, but I don't know if that's going to drive a whole host of advertising. So I think, going back to the point, it's a mix of everything.
Right, but what I mean is, like, a sponsor might want to make a show about their product versus a sponsor might want to work with a particular genre, which is what you were talking about. I was wondering what the direction of travel was, whether it's one or the other.
Clients in the region love making content about themselves. Like, the reason we don't have a good podcast ecosystem here is because the last few years, clients have decided to make podcasts about their own things that no one listens to, rather than supporting podcast creators with sponsored shows. And it goes back to the kind of vanity Facebook pages of 12 years ago. People like having followers of them rather than advertising good content. So, but I think it's part of an education thing. And people want to make their own shows about their own brands rather than advertising other sectors, other genres.
Yeah, and then in terms of genres more generally, I think we've noticed that within drama or scripted, brand involvement has been quite prevalent, because you can build that into the script, into the storyline. By definition, it's all scripted. So we've all seen the plethora of shows or movies that pan over that Mercedes logo just for that just bit too long, or Iron Man with Aston Martin or what have you. So I think scripted is really well set up for brand integration. For documentaries, factual and similar genres, it needs much more careful curation, because if you're making a show about a brand, you've got to be careful that it's not a 30-minute advert or a 60-minute advert. That's very, very off-putting. But if you can make it, we do a show with the supermarket in the UK, but it's all about the sort of farming processes. So it's like a farming education show. and then the brand is sort of slightly incidental to it, albeit the kind of narrative interweaves very neatly with what they're looking to do. And then in other areas, I mean, kids, we don't tend to do much in the kids animation space, but my limited knowledge around that is just you have to be very, very careful because it's quite closely regulated, certainly in the UK and I imagine most parts of the world as well.
Thanks. I think we're out of time now, 8 minutes over. So thank you to all of you who have stayed. And big round of applause for our panelists here today.